But one of the big local stories of the day, one of the national stories indeed of the day, because firefighters across Beardsouth and Bucks went on strike today along with colleagues in England and Wales in a row over pensions. The Fire Brigade Union is campaigning against changes it says will mean firefighters will have to work longer, pay more into their pensions and receive less.
Union have walked out across the country until 4 o'clock in protest at changes to their pensions. Tony Fisher has been at Luton Central Fire Station.
Around 30 firefighters walked out at midday today with placards saying things like, "We save people, not banks." They're now standing at the corner of Studley Road and New Bedford Road, being greeted by honking cars driving past.
Our senior reporter Tony Fisher spent some of the day outside Luton Central Fire Station today. He joins in the studio. Tony, what was the mood like?
Well, Rob, around 30 firefighters walked out at midday with placards with things like "We save lives, not banks" on them. The mood wasn't sort of really militant. I don't think firefighters are really militant. It was more sort of one of regret, really, that they were having to do this. This was a kind of a last straw. Now, this strike's mainly over the age at which they may be forced to retire. The union says it's a dangerous, dirty job, not for a 58-year-old, 60-year-old man and woman, and it points to a Government Commission report, Dr. Tony Williams' report, which the union states says that working up to 60 will be physically challenging for up to 50 to 90% of the firefighter workforce. But the trouble is, this pension scheme was drawn up in 2006 involving retiring at 60, and that was originally based on firefighters being able to be redeployed, but those redeployment jobs, they say, have all been taken up. So I asked Jamie what would happen if at 55 a firefighter wasn't deemed fit enough to continue frontline duties until the age of 60.
Effectively, your capability dismissed on the grounds of fitness. If someone was trying to try and access their pension with the current proposal from government at the age of 55, they would face losing 21.9% of their pension, which is a disgrace effectively for not being able to access your pension just because you got old. Nobody ages the same. This is not about stopping people that can work until 60. This is just about giving the people that can't physically carry on the option to access their pension without being financially penalised.
So what are you saying there, Rob? If they're forced to retire early, they could face losing 21% of their pension pot. Government are effectively washing their hands of any decision over this fitness issue, leaving that up to each local fire and rescue authority to decide who is and who isn't fit enough to continue. He added Scotland isn't going on strike because their government are engaged in meaningful discussions, he said.
Tony, what about the firefighters on the picket line? I saw them. Are they just as angry?
Yes, they're all pretty angry. I spoke to Steve. He says they want the government to get back to the negotiating table, come up with a more reasonable proposal. As I say, he said if you retire at 55, you'll lose 20% of your pension pot. I said, well, why are you so special? Why are the firefighters so special? And he said basically they'll have to contribute more, up to 14%, and no one else, he said, in the public sector is paying 14% of their wages towards their pensions. So they'll receive less income, then they have to wait till the normal pensionable age to get their state pension at 68.
The test that they're bringing in for the entrance test, in order to get you to be fit enough at the end, is much higher than the requirement would be if you looked at the job and said, what do you need to do to be a firefighter? How strong, how fit do you need to be? It's way above that. Our fear is that they're building in an automatic way of making people redundant and getting them out of the fire service.
So what does the government say, Tony?
The government, Robs, has maintained that the changes were fair and would still give firemen and women one of the most generous pensions in the public sector. The Fire Minister, Brandon Lewis, said the dispute was over pensions, not complaints that firefighters will have to work on the front line until they're 60. He says that a firefighter who earns £29,000 and retires after a full career age 60 will get a £19,000 a year pension, rising to £26,000 with state pension. An equivalent private sector pension pot would be worth over £500,000 and require fighters to contribute twice as much, he said. He goes on to say that the firefighter pension age of 60 was introduced in 2006, as I said earlier, and is in line with the police and armed forces. And he says, we've been clear with the Fire Brigades Union, our pension reforms are not introducing national fitness standard. Firefighter fitness remains a local fire and rescue authority matter, as I said earlier, and the unions say that the government's basically passing the buck on this issue. They say the plan is for continuous action, but maybe after today they may cancel that. Depends what happens with the negotiations between the unions and the government.
Tony, thank you. Senior reporter Tony Fisher, who spent some of the day outside Luton Central Fire Station. That 4-hour strike, of course, is now over. More on the story before 6. Now, the fire brigade unions say there were strong support for the strike, with stations being closed and picket lines manned across the 3 counties. In Hertfordshire, for example, only 12 fire engines out of the 41 of the county were being used.
We've tried to engage with the government and with Brandon Lewis over the past 2 years, looking at an occupational pension scheme, and we said if it's an occupational pension scheme, it needs to reflect the occupation. That occupation is firefighting. Unfortunately, the government is trying to apply a one-size-fits-all approach to pension changes, and they haven't taken account of the specific issues facing us in the fire rescue service.
It's all come about because you want firefighters to work until they're 60, but a recent government review, your own review, has found that half of current firefighters between the age of 50 and 54 are no longer able to meet fire rescue service fitness standards. So why make them work even longer when they're not up to it in their early 50s?
The firefighters at 60 is just unobtainable. Most of the firefighters who have worked beyond 55 are mainly officers who will actually stand outside and make managerial decisions, as opposed to actually going into the fire wearing and breathing apparatus and dealing with issues.
One of the interesting facts is that there are already in excess of 500 of those firefighters that are in their mid to late 50s. So it can be done. And can't those people move to more of a backroom role?
I'll take the first point. They're mainly officers who are actually outside the fire making managerial decisions, as I said. They're not actually the firefighters who are going in wearing breathing apparatus where it is a strenuous job.
Let me interrupt you, because we've also got Andy Ward here, who's just retired. You worked until your mid to late 50s. Aren't you proof it can be done?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I really struggled in the last couple of years, and I think probably I should have left the fire service at 55. I was really having trouble, keeping fit and doing the job. But as Neil has already said, I was a watch manager, so I was able to stand outside the building and make command decisions.
You have to be particularly fit to be in the job anyway, but certainly for female firefighters, you've got to be in the upper 2% of athletes when you join the job in order to maintain that at 60. You just can't achieve it.
With proper fitness training, regular fitness training that we all should do, a couple of hours a week, firefighters can stay fully fit. And
according to government's own figures, 2/3 of firefighters over the age of 55 are not passing fitness standards.
They are striking at West Bromwich Fire Station to give a big message out to the public that this is unsafe for firefighters and this is unsafe for members of the public.
I've been doing the job over 2 decades, and it takes its toll upon your joints, and it's harder and harder and harder to do all the time.